Welcome to episode 4 of A Christmas Table. Sorry for the screaming baby, I promise it's not mine. We're here at Landers today to try and shop for the perfect ingredients that you can serve your guests or your family at home. We previously did bangus, and it was absolutely delicious. We're doing pork necks. Today is all about beef, so I'm trying to find the perfect cut of beef that I can roast, and I think I found it. It's right here. We're gonna be doing a beautiful roast using a New Zealand beef strip loin. That cap fat is nice and yellow, and it's just gonna melt and be delicious when we bring it to the kitchen. Let's go.
Let's make a fire, just me and you. Talk about all that we can do. We gon' make this December a Christmas to remember. We gon' make this December a Christmas to remember forever.
We've previously showed you how to make a pork feast, a vegan feast, a chicken feast, and a fish feast, and now we're gonna be talking about beef. There is nothing that puts a smile on my face, especially at a Christmas table, when I see a beautiful roast beef on the table. It's actually not hard to do. It might seem a little scary to make because it's just so big, so you think you need to cook it for a long time in the oven. The recipe I want to show you today is actually very fast, and I want to get you out of the kitchen in 90 minutes. So the first thing we're going to do is you grab a beautiful piece of strip loin that we're going to use as a roast. I like using strip loin because it has that gorgeous fat cap right on top, which protects the meat and makes it nice and moist and tender inside. If you use something with a bone inside, you could even get something a little bit more tender, but it won't be as fast to cook. So again, we're talking about speed and quality for this Christmas season. First thing you want to do is grab a food processor to make the base flavor that we'll be using for our large strip loin. So we're gonna grab a bunch of garlic, as many as possible, and then we're gonna take some fresh thyme leaves and we're gonna remove the leaves from the stalk. This might kind of get slightly burnt and black when it's in the oven, but honestly, that's something that doesn't really bother me. We're just putting a bunch here. You could also use some thyme, some rosemary, really up to you. But you want to stay away from herbs like basil or parsley because those will burn way too quickly. To this, we will be adding some salt. You can be generous here because this is literally just the outer cooking of our strip loin, so kind of like a rub. Some black pepper, and then some pumice or some olive oil. And then all we want to do is blend all of this into a paste. You'll see that'll be a nice fine paste. That's exactly what we are looking for right here. You're then gonna take your beautiful strip loin, then take the paste, and that's gonna go all over our strip loin. We're gonna also be using this as kind of one of the sauces to serve the meat with. So you can kind of get dirty, your hands will stink like garlic at this point. Rub that all over. So that is good to go. So now we have our food processor. Again, we left some of the seasoning that was in there, so the garlic, the salt, and the pepper, all that will combine really nicely. I've got some pine nuts, some grated Parmesan cheese. We're gonna put some flat leaf parsley in there. Honestly, I don't mind the stalks in this recipe, so you can go ahead and put it with the stalks if you want to. And then we'll be adding some fresh basil leaves. For these ones, I'm gonna remove most of the stalks, just keep the leaves. But again, you don't have to throw away the stalks. You can use that to kind of infuse oils or make like little nice basil green oils that have really great color. That is always really useful. This is a great sauce to make ahead because it's kind of like a pesto, and you can use it, I think in the fridge. You can keep this for like easily a week and it won't go bad because we're gonna add a little bit of acidity there to preserve everything. Healthy drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, tiny bit of vinegar, and a small pinch of sugar because I find that the basil in the Philippines isn't very sweet, so this kind of just helps make it a bit more sweet. Close it up, blend everything. Open it up, and then from time to time, just scrape down the sides to make sure everything's getting blended properly. You want a nice texture like that where it's a little still coarse because of the nuts, but still nice and blended. After 2 hours, your meat's good to go. Like I said, you can also do this the night before. All we're gonna do now is transfer the meat out, put that on the grill in the oven, and then put this thing right in the bottom to catch all those juices from the garlic, the fat, all that flavor that's just be basically melting off the meat, which we'll then be able to use as the base of our sauce. All we need to do is place the meat flat side up, roast it for 15 minutes at 450 Fahrenheit. Then we're gonna reduce the temperature to 350 Fahrenheit. That is gonna cook for at least 35 to 40 minutes, depending on the thickness and the weight of your strip loin. This is probably like my favorite purchase this year, honestly, not sponsored, but basically I can put this in the oven and I can monitor the temperature on my phone so it can tell me when it's ready so I can drop the temperature down. Since tomatoes in the Philippines aren't super sweet, I like to cook them down to really release all their flavor. So we'll grab a couple of tomatoes, quarter them up. All that gets placed into a roasting pan and just toss all that together until everything is properly oiled. And that goes into the oven until the tomatoes are completely blistered, release some of their sugars, and get nice and colored. Next, a little slaw to just kind of bring up some acidity because obviously the meat is gonna be very fatty and intense. So chop up some apples, which we're just gonna cut up into like small little matchsticks. Juice of 1 lemon, a little bit of sugar, mix everything together. Just mix everything together so that the apples don't get brown. The acidity of the lemon will protect the color of the apples. And that slaw is basically ready to go. It might seem very simple, but it's super tasty and will just elevate any dish that you put on the Christmas table. Once the roasting juices will be available to us, we'll be making like a quick little sauce. So all I'm gonna do is cut up a bunch of different mushrooms. We don't need to add anything at this point because remember the roasting juices already has a bunch of garlic and a ton of flavor coming from the beef fat. We're just looking to wilt this down and then we'll be cooking the roasting juices separately and then combining both together. What's roast beef without potatoes? I want to do something healthier by using sweet potatoes, but because sweet potatoes tend to be a bit more fibrous than regular potatoes, it's really important still to add a little bit of white potatoes just so that the consistency and texture is closer to what you would expect from a velvety mashed potato. We boiled them until they were nice and tender in a bit of salted water. Now they're ready to go, so all we're gonna do is cut them up, mash them, and then add them with some butter and some cream and just make it delicious. You can mash this with a fork if you want to, but I'm lazy. We then bring that all back to the stove. About 60 grams to 80 grams of butter. Once the butter is melted, keep that to the side. Another pot goes on, some all-purpose cream goes in. Wait till that gets nice and liquid. I actually, when I'm making mashed potatoes, don't like to salt or season them yet because you want to be able to taste everything together with the cream before you actually make that commitment of salting it. I've over-seasoned mashed potatoes so many times because I salted the potatoes at this stage. Once your cream is nice and liquid, we're gonna very sparingly add this to the mash on top of the stove, starting with just this spatula over here and bringing it together. Add the rest in, mix together, turn off the fire. At this point, you should be able to do it with a whisk. While doing this, it really comes down to personal preference in terms of how liquidy or how chunky you want it to be. I like mine kind of smooth, but still chunks of potatoes in there. One little trick I do usually to get my mashed potatoes to fluff up nicely when I'm using a whisk is right before serving them, I put them in the oven for about 10 minutes. It'll just dry everything up and get a little fluffier and have that texture that I'm looking for, that airiness. Only at this point will I season it with a little bit of salt, and then if you're feeling naughty, you can always add more butter. We're gonna take it out now. I'm first gonna take all the drippings, transfer that into my saucepan. So you'll see you've developed kind of like a beautiful crust right on top. It's nice and hard, so that fat cap really just cooked perfectly. All we gotta do is rest it for 20 minutes. This is super key. A roast beef like this is not supposed to be served piping hot. Then we'll take out our tomatoes. Simple, beautifully blistered, got a little bit of coloring, exactly what we wanted. We got all these beautiful roasting juices. All we're gonna do is add a little bit of flour, so about 1 tablespoon to the jus. Mix everything together, make sure it's not lumpy. So that has trapped absolutely all the flavor from the cook. You'll see that very quickly the fat and the flour will basically thicken each other out. So let that come to like a really slight boil, and then as it thickens, we add it to the mushrooms. Once it's thickened slightly, transfer all of it to the mushrooms, and then we're gonna let all those flavors boil down together. At this point, you can already taste it. So right now, it's extremely fatty. So we're gonna add a little bit of salt. And I feel, and this is why tasting is so important, I feel like this needs a little bit of acidity. So we're gonna cook that down, and I'm gonna show you a little trick. So consistency-wise, we're almost there. So I kept the roasting pan, which is very key. So you got your wine. The rule is, don't cook with anything you wouldn't drink. It's a very bold wine, which is perfect for this. The wine will just basically cook down here a little bit, so the acidity will go out, but it'll also grab all the trapped flavors that are into the pan. So that should lighten the sauce a little bit. Once you smell it and you can see that that aridity or that acidity has dissipated a little bit, then we're good to go to transfer it into our mushrooms. Mix all that together. I'm still gonna let this simmer down for like 2 to 3 minutes to thicken it. And this is completely optional, up to you. I'm gonna add a little bit of cream. A bit of cream goes in just to bind everything together, but you can already serve it without the cream if you don't want to. Our sauce is done. Now to our tomatoes. Good quality Greek yogurt goes onto our plate. This is gonna be like the perfect acidic balance to the fattiness of the beef. Spread that out, grab our tomatoes, some black pepper, beautiful drizzle of olive oil. You can add some greens and stuff to that if you want to. First side dish, done. Let's transfer everything to like bowls and stuff. Now, if that doesn't look like a festive Christmas plate, I don't know what does. Let's cut it up and taste a little bit of everything. That sauce, a little bit of the pesto in there, and that balance is just beautiful. A little bit of the sweet potato mash. Like I said in the beginning, it's all about getting you in and out of the kitchen in like 90 minutes. Very quick prep, very beautiful looking food. Spend more time with your friends and family, less time in the kitchen. This is almost the last video we're doing, so if you haven't catched all the previous episodes, please make sure you do so. The next one that's coming out tomorrow is like this crazy seafood Christmas Filipino style burrito, which I think will be a great addition to any Christmas table. So make sure you catch that. We did about 6 videos all total, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Peace out.